The CEO pulled the cover off a wrecked Porsche 911 GT3 in front of her whole staff, gestured at the ruin of it like a game show prize, and laughed. Even Porsche gave up on this. And the quiet single dad she'd summoned to haul it away looked at the wreck for a long moment, and then looked at her, and said the sentence that wiped the smile clean off her face. "Oh, but I can rebuild it in just 24 hours. Picture the scene. A private fleet garage on a corporate estate, climate controlled, gallery lit, a row of gleaming exotics along one wall like a showroom, and in the far corner, under a gray cover, the thing nobody talked about, a silver 911 GT3, one of the purest driver's cars Porsche ever built. Now, a wreck. Front end caved, bodywork folded, the whole nose of it opened up like a wound. It had sat under that cover for months, and this morning, Petra Lang, CEO, private equity operator, collector of beautiful machines, had gathered a handful of her people around it to enjoy a small piece of theater at the expense of the workingmen she'd called in to cart it off. "I'll be honest with you," Petra said, walking a slow circle around the wreck, playing to her staff. "I had the factory look at it, Porsche themselves. And do you know what they told me?" She let it hang, savoring it. Beyond economical repair. Written off. A total loss. The people who built the car looked at it and said, "Don't bother." So, she turned to the man in the gray work shirt holding a water bottle, the collision shop owner she'd hired to dispose of it. "It's yours, if you want the scrap." "Congratulations, even Porsche gave up on this." Her staff chuckled on cue. It was a good bit of billionaire gifting a mechanic a pile of certified garbage, and Petra Lang basked in the small warm glow of it. The man in the gray shirt was named Judd Calloway. He was 44 years old, ran a modest body shop across town, and had come expecting exactly this errand: haul away a wreck, make a few dollars on the salvage. He walked up to the GT3 slowly. He crouched at the ruined nose. He put one hand flat on the buckled frame, not the way you touch scrap. The way a doctor touches a patient, and he was quiet for about 10 seconds, reading something in the wreck that nobody else in that garage could see. Then he stood up and said it. "Oh, but I can rebuild it in just 24 hours. The chuckling stopped. Petra Lang's smile faltered. "I'm sorry, rebuild it? Did you not hear me?" Porsche looked at this car. "The factory. The people who made it. They said it can't be done." "No, ma'am," Judd said, and his voice was calm and certain, and carried not one drop of disrespect. "That's not what Porsche said. I promise you it isn't. Porsche said it can't be done their way. 6 weeks, factory certification, liability sign-off, all by the road car book. And by that book, they're 100% right. I'd have told you the same." He looked back down at the wreck. "But I didn't learn this trade from the road car book, ma'am. I learned it in a world where a car that died in Saturday qualifying was racing again Sunday morning, where the deadline wasn't 6 weeks, it was sunrise. And in that world, 24 hours isn't a miracle." He almost smiled. "It's a shift." Petra stared at him. Around her, the staff had gone quiet in a different way now, the way a room goes quiet when a joke stops being a joke. "You're serious," she said. "Come by at 6 tomorrow morning, ma'am. 24 hours from now." Judd picked up his water bottle and looked her dead in the eye, and added the sentence that made no sense to anyone in that garage, the sentence she wouldn't understand for exactly 24 hours. "And do me a favor. Bring your driving gloves." He loaded the wreck onto his trailer while they were still trying to figure out what he'd meant. 24 hours later, Petra Lang would understand all of it: the gloves, the wreck, the reason she'd really kept it in that corner all these months, and she would understand that the quiet man had never actually been talking about a car. But that's the end. Let's start with why a billionaire keeps a wreck she'll never fix in the corner of a garage full of perfect machines. Petra Lang was not a cruel woman. And this story only works if you understand that first, because the easy read of her is a snob, and the true read is something much more common and much more human, So common you may find a little of it in yourself before we're through. Petra collected permission slips. Not literally. But if you'd followed her closely, if you'd watched the actual mechanism of her life instead of its glittering surface, you'd have seen it. Petra Lang had spent her whole adult life quietly hunting for authoritative permission to give up. For the official no, for the expert, the report, the verdict, the credentialed voice that would look at a hard thing she was afraid of and say it can't be done, because when the authority said it couldn't be done, then Petra's not doing it stopped being cowardice and became prudence. The verdict laundered the retreat. It turned quitting into wisdom. Understand where it came from, because wounds always come from somewhere. Petra had, once, long ago, been the other kind of person, a striver, a risk-taker, a young woman who tried hard things and sometimes got hurt trying them. And getting hurt had frightened her over the years into a slow, invisible philosophy that trying was dangerous, that reaching exposed you, that the safe and sophisticated move was to find the authoritative reason not to reach, and then you got to keep your dignity and your safety, and call the combination being realistic. She'd built a whole career on it. Honestly, private equity rewards the person who can find the reason a deal won't work, and she'd built a whole life on it without noticing. Every time some part of her wanted to try something, risk something, want something out loud, Petra would go looking for the expert who'd tell her it was impractical, and she'd feel the sweet relief of being let off the hook by someone qualified to let her off it. She'd have told you she respected expertise. What she actually loved was the permission. A yes, it's possible from an authority frightened her, because it put the choice back in her hands. A no, it can't be done from an authority soothed her, because it took the choice away. She hunted no's the way other people hunt yeses. Every it can't be done she'd ever collected was pinned up in the museum of her caution, and she visited them when she needed to feel okay about all the things she'd stopped reaching for. Which brings us to the wreck in the corner, and to the thing she hadn't told a single soul, the thing that gave that gray-covered ruin its terrible private meaning. The GT3 had been Petra's one rebellion. She'd bought it 2 years ago, in a rare hot moment of wanting something, a promise to herself that she was going to finally live a little, stop managing her life from behind glass, stop being the person who found reasons not to, and actually go drive something wild and alive, and a little dangerous, the way the striving young woman she used to be would have. It was, for Petra Lang, an enormous act of courage disguised as a car purchase. It was her saying yes to herself for the first time in 20 years, and on her third weekend with it, driving faster than she was ready for, reaching past her own edge exactly the way the purchase was meant to make her, she'd crashed it. Hard, walked away without a scratch but shaking, white, terrified. A woman who'd stuck her hand out toward aliveness and gotten it slammed in a door. The physical wreck was the GT3's. The wreck that mattered was internal. Her one attempt to stop being careful had ended in a spinning, screeching, heart-stopping proof that being careful had been right all along. And then this is the part that sealed it: the factory wrote the car off, beyond economical repair. And Petra Lang received that verdict not as an insurance conclusion, but as a revelation, the most authoritative permission slip she'd ever been handed. Official, credentialed proof from the people who built the thing that trying gets you wrecked. And the wreck can't be undone, and giving up is the correct and expert-endorsed response. The factory hadn't just totaled a car. They'd totaled her rebellion, and validated her retreat, and handed her a certificate that said, "See? You were right to be afraid. Stay behind the glass." That's why she kept the wreck, not out of sentiment. As Exhibit A, as the centerpiece of her museum of permission, slips the physical silver ruined proof that the one time she reached she got hurt, and the authorities agreed she should stop reaching. She'd walk past it in that corner and feel, obscurely, justified. And when a humble collision shop man came to haul it away, she couldn't resist making a little theater of it. Even Porsche gave up on this, because his hauling it to the scrapyard would be the final confirmation. The last rites on the version of herself she'd abandoned in that crash. She had no idea she'd just handed that version of herself to the one man alive who refused to believe in permission slips. Judd Calloway had spent 15 years in a world where the word impossible had a completely different meaning than it has anywhere else, and that world is the reason he could look at a factory-condemned wreck and say 24 hours without a flicker of a bluff. Judd had been a crew chief in endurance racing. Not just any crew, the flying squad. If you don't know the term, let me give it to you, because it explains everything about the man. In endurance racing, the long races, the 24-hour classics cars crash. Constantly, a car goes off at 3 in the afternoon on Saturday, comes back to the garage folded in half, structurally destroyed, looking exactly like the wreck in Petra Lang's corner, and the race is still going. The clock does not stop for your crash. So every serious team keeps a flying squad, the overnight crash rebuild crew. The people whose entire job is to take a car that any road-going shop would condemn on sight and have it back on the grid before the next session, because the alternative is a DNF, and a DNF is death. Judd had run those crews for 15 years. He had rebuilt, from catastrophic wreckage, more cars against a sunrise deadline than most mechanics see in a career. Cars destroyed on Saturday, racing on Sunday not as a miracle, as a Tuesday, as the job. And here is the thing that world burned into him, the creed that was about to turn Petra Lang's life inside out. There are 2 books. There's the road car book, the one Porsche answered from, and correctly, which is written around economics, liability, certification, and the assumption that time is abundant. 6 weeks. Do it right. Do it once. Cover yourself. And then there's the paddock book, the one Judd learned from, which is written around a single brutal fact. The race won't wait. The paddock book doesn't ask, is this economical? It asks, are the bones true? And can we make it run by sunrise? Different questions. Different clock. Different definition of impossible. When the factory said beyond economical repair, they were answering a question from their book, the economical question. The should we question, and they were right. Judd was answering a different question from a different book, the can it be done by dawn question, and he was also right. Both true. 2 books. Petra had mistaken one book's no for the last word, the way frightened people always do. His creed, worn smooth, the factory book tells you what can't be done in 6 weeks. The paddock book tells you what must be done by sunrise. Don't ever let the first book tell you the second book's business. He'd left it all when Tess was born. And I'll say this part quickly and cleanly, because there's no tragedy in it. Just a father's arithmetic. Endurance racing is 40 weekends a year gone, a life lived in other countries' garages. And when his daughter arrived, Judd looked at the calendar of his career and the calendar of her childhood and understood you cannot have both. He and Tess's mom parted ways amicably a few years later. She's around. She's good. They co-parent fine, and Judd became the everyday father and traded the paddock for a collision shop across town where he could be home for dinner. No dead wife. No wound. Just a man who chose bedtimes over the podium and never once regretted it. But here's what he brought with him from that world, and it's the whole engine of the rebuild. His shop, unremarkable from the street, was organized on the inside to a standard nobody local understood. It was a pit box. Every tool in its place, its shadow painted on the board. Parts and materials staged and pre-sorted. Processes drilled into muscle memory over 15 years of sunrise deadlines. His customers thought he was just tidy. What they were actually looking at was 15 years of preparation, crystallized a shop built so that when the moment came, the moment would be fast. because everything slow had already been done, years ago, in advance. Judd Calloway lived his whole life ready for a deadline that hadn't come yet. His daughter Tess, 11, had only ever known Shop Dad. She'd never seen the paddock. It was before her time, a thing that lived in a few photos and stories she half believed. To Tess, her father was a nice, quiet man who fixed dented cars and made good spaghetti, and she loved him, but she'd never seen him fly. She'd never seen the other man, the Sunrise Man, the one the racing world used to call for when a car came back in pieces and the clock was running. She was about to. Because Judd had made a decision, standing in that fleet garage, that he hadn't fully made yet, even as he said, "Bring your driving gloves," and it was going to mean one long night. And he wanted his daughter there for it, because some things a kid needs to see their parent do. He backed the trailer into his pit box shop at 5:45 in the evening. He looked at the clock on the wall, and Judd Calloway, flying squad, 15 years retired, cracked his knuckles and went back to work against a sunrise. One more time. Hour 0. 6 p.m. The GT3 came off the trailer into the bright, clean light of the shop. And the first thing Judd did was the most important thing in the whole story. And it wasn't fast, it was the opposite of fast. He did the inspection. Slow, total, honest, because the paddock book has one iron law beneath all its speed, and Judd said it out loud to Tess, who was perched on a stool with a soda, watching. Speed is never the first thing, baby. Truth is the first thing. Before I promise a single hour, I have to know the bones are true, and this is where the story is careful and fair, and I want you to notice it. Judd got down under that car and read its structure the way 15 years had taught him, and what he was looking for was the one thing that separates possible from impossible in his world, is the core, the skeleton, the fundamental structure of the car sound. Or is it gone? Because if the bones were broken truly, structurally gone, then Judd Calloway would have rolled out from under that car and told Petra Lang the truth without an ounce of shame. "Ma'am, Porsche was right, and I was wrong. And here are your keys back. This car's spine is broken, and no honest man rebuilds it in a night. Go shake the factory's hand. They told you the truth." That was a real possible ending, and the fact that Judd would have taken it is exactly what made him trustworthy. But the bones were true. The wreck was ugly, the damage was all in the parts that bolt on, the folded panels, and the shattered front end, and the cosmetic catastrophe that makes a car look dead but underneath the carnage. The essential structure it held. It was, in paddock terms, a car that looked destroyed and was actually just disassembled by violence, which is precisely the kind of wreck the flying squad eats for breakfast, and precisely the kind of car the road car book still writes off. Because the road car book is asking, is it economical and certifiable? And the answer to that is genuinely no. While the answer to can it be made whole and true again by sunrise is yes. The bones are true, Judd said, rolling out, and the relief in his own voice surprised him. "Okay, baby, now we can go fast, because we earned the right to. Watch your old man work. And here's what the next 8 hours actually were, and why they were possible." And it's the theme of the whole film crystallizing on a shop floor. So let it land. The night was fast because the preparation was slow. Every minute Judd didn't waste that night was a minute he'd pre-spent, years ago, building the pit box shop, drilling the sequences, staging the world so that when a sunrise deadline finally came again, he wouldn't be figuring things out, he'd be executing. He tore down the ruined front end in a fraction of the time it should take. Not because his hands were magic, but because he'd done this exact teardown 10,000 times in another life, and his hands no longer needed his brain's permission. He worked in the flying squad sequence, stabilize, strip, assess, stage, rebuild a chore order refined over 15 years of races, where doing things in the wrong order costs you the sunrise. I'll keep the mechanical detail impressionistic, the way we always do, Because the point was never the wrench work. The point was the readiness. Judd wasn't inventing anything that night. He was spending 20 years of preparation in one concentrated 8-hour burn. Tess watched her father become someone she'd never met. The quiet spaghetti dad was gone. In his place was a man moving with an economy and certainty and controlled speed that she had no category for, a man who clearly, obviously, deeply knew what he was doing at a level she'd never witnessed. Around 11, she said it out loud, in the small, stunned voice of a kid revising her whole picture of a parent. Dad, I've never seen you like this. You're fast. You're like a completely different person. Judd didn't stop working, but he smiled. This is the person I was before you, baby, the paddock person. You just never got to meet him. Because he stayed home to raise you, and he'd make that trade 1,000 more times. A beat. But he's still in here. That's the secret nobody tells you about the fast nights, Tess. You don't rebuild a car in 24 hours. He torqued something down, precise and quick. You rebuild it in 20 years. And then, one day, you have 24 hours and everybody who watches thinks they're seeing a miracle. They're not. They're seeing the 20 years. The night's just when it shows. Hour 8. 2 a.m. The wreck no longer looked like a wreck. It looked like a car in surgery opened, honest, halfway home. Judd stepped back to drink water and check the clock. On schedule. Bones true. Sunrise 16 hours out and the hard part earned. And headlights swung across the shop's front window. A car had pulled into his empty lot at 2 in the morning. A door opened. And Petra Lang, who had not been able to sleep, who had lain awake in her big house, unable to stop thinking about a quiet man, who'd said 24 hours about the one thing in her life she'd filed as permanently, expertly, officially, overstood in the doorway of the pitbox shop, in the dark, and stared at her wrecked GT3 half-resurrected under the lights. You couldn't sleep either, Judd said, not surprised at all. He nodded at the coffee pot. It's fresh. Come in, ma'am. I think it's time we talked about the actual car you brought me, because it was never the Porsche. She came in slowly, out of the dark, in a coat thrown over regular clothes, no white suit, no staff, no audience, and she stood in front of her half-rebuilt car, and could not stop looking at it. And Judd poured her a coffee in a chip shop mug, and let the silence do its work. Because 15 years of sunrise deadlines had also taught him that some things you have to wait for. I don't understand, Petra finally said. And it wasn't the CEO's voice. It was smaller, younger. Porsche said it was impossible. And you're just doing it. In your garage. Overnight. How is that even she stopped? How are you doing what the factory said couldn't be done? Because the factory answered a different question than the one you heard, ma'am. Judd said gently, wiping his hands, leaning against a bench. I keep coming back to this because it's the whole thing. Porsche is a great company, and when they said beyond economical repair, they were telling the God's honest truth from their book. Their book asks, is it worth it? Is it certifiable? Can we stake our name on it? All inside the road car world where you've got 6 weeks and a liability department. By that book, this car's a write-off. 100%. I'd sign the same paper. He nodded at the GT3. But their no was never a fact about the car, ma'am. It was a fact about their book. And you took a sentence out of somebody's book and you turned it into the last word on what's possible. And that, if you'll let a mechanic say so, is a thing I suspect you've been doing your whole life. Petra went very still. You want to know how I really knew I could rebuild this car in 24 hours? Judd went on. Quiet. Same way I knew the second I looked at it. The damage is all in the parts that bolt on. The nose, the panels, the stuff that folds up loud and looks like the end of the world. But the spine held, ma'am. The core of this car never broke. It just got buried under a lot of wreckage that looks a lot worse than it is. He held her eyes and let her hear the second meaning arrive under the first. It looked totaled. It was never totaled. There's a difference with cars, and with just about everything else that gets called a write-off. And Petra Long, at 3 a.m, in a stranger's garage, in front of the wreck of her one rebellion, told a mechanic the thing she'd never told anyone. I crashed it myself. It came out flat, then not flat. It wasn't in storage. It wasn't a mystery. I didn't buy it wrecked. I crashed it. Third weekend I owned it. Her voice did something. I bought that car because I was going to finally God. It sounds so stupid out loud. I was going to finally live a little. I've spent my whole life behind glass, being careful, being smart, finding the reason not to, and I bought that ridiculous, wild, alive car as a promise to myself that I was done being afraid, that I was going to reach for something. She laughed, and it broke. And I reached, and I drove it too hard because reaching was the whole point, and I crashed it into a wall at speed and walked away shaking so hard I couldn't hold my phone. My one time reaching for something. And it ended in a wreck. And then she looked at the car. Then the factory wrote it off. Said it couldn't be undone, and I felt I'm ashamed of this. I felt relieved. Because now it was official. The experts agreed. Reaching gets you wrecked, and the wreck can't be fixed. And the smart move, the endorsed move, is to go back behind the glass and never do that again. She wiped her face. I kept it in that corner because it proved I was right to quit. It was my evidence. And this morning I was going to watch you haul my evidence to the scrapyard, and instead she gestured helplessly at the resurrecting car. You're undoing it. You're standing there voiding the one piece of proof I've been leaning on for 2 years. Judd was quiet for a moment, out of respect. And then he gave her the sentence that was the true center of the whole night. Ma'am, the factory graded your car. He set down his coffee. You decided it graded you. Those are two different things, and you welded them together in the dark, and you've been carrying the weld ever since. He looked at the GT3. The car was never totaled. The bones were true the whole time. It just needed somebody who worked from a different book and wasn't scared of how bad it looked. And I've got a strong feeling, Petra, that the exact same thing is true about the part of you that bought this car in the first place. The one who wanted to live a little. You think you totaled her in that crash. I think she's just been sitting under a cover in the corner, looking a lot worse than she is, waiting for somebody to check whether the bones are still true. He picked his tools back up. They're still true, yours and the car's both. Now you should stay and watch the rest. I think you need to see this one get finished. Petra Lang sat down on a shop stool in her coat at 3 a.m. and stayed. Hour 16. 10:00 a.m. Every sunrise rebuild hits a wall. Judd knew it was coming. They always come. And it came right on schedule. A problem with a specific part. The kind of snag that in the road car book means stop, order it, wait 3 weeks. The exact kind of obstacle that turns a 24-hour promise into a lie. A crucial component, needed to finish, not available in the time he had. In the factory book, this is where the rebuild dies. And Petra, who had stayed, who had watched all night, who felt the deadline like a hand around her own throat, now saw Judd's face and understood the danger, and said, in a voice full of the old reflex, "So that's it. You can't get the part. It can't be," and she almost said done. Almost reached for the sweet relief of the permission slip. The see, it was impossible after all. The retreat she'd spent her life perfecting. You could watch her reach for it. "Don't," Judd said, not unkindly, catching her mid-reach. "Don't you dare go for that. I watched you reach for the quit just now, same muscle you've been building for 20 years. Watch what the paddock book does with a wall instead." And he did the thing the flying squad exists to do. He solved it another way. Because the paddock book's answer to the part won't come in time is never then we stop. It's then we find another road to the same place. I'll keep it impressionistic. But Judd solved the unsolvable part problem the way sunrise crews always have. Ingenuity, improvisation, a fabricated solution, a different path to the same honest result, the accumulated cleverness of 15 years of races, where the part never came in time and the car raced anyway. It cost him an hour and a lot of sweat. It did not cost him the deadline. That, he said, wiping his face, the wall behind him, is the whole difference between the two books, ma'am. The road car book hits that wall and files the write-off. The paddock book hits that wall and asks what's another way. Same wall, two completely different lives, depending which book you're holding when you hit it. Petra Lang watched a dead end become a road, and something in her face that had been welded shut for 2 years started quietly to come loose. Hour 19. 1 p.m. Tess, who had slept a few hours in the office and come back, had her moment here, and it's the small beating heart of the back half. She'd been handing her father tools all night and morning, drawn deeper into the work. And somewhere in the home stretch she looked up at the CEO on the stool, the sad rich lady who'd been watching her dad all night, and said, with the terrible directness of 11, "You didn't think he could do it either, did you? When you gave him the car, you were kind of making fun of him." Petra, caught, admitted it yes, and Tess nodded slowly and delivered the line that went through Petra like a spike. "Everybody thinks my dad's just the quiet guy who fixes dents. But there's a whole other guy in there they never met. The fast guy." She went back to handing tools. "I only met him last night. I've been kind of sad I missed him my whole life. But I get it now, he stayed home so I could have the boring dad." A pause. Turns out the boring dad and the fast guy were the same guy the whole time. He just doesn't show the fast guy to people who came to laugh. Petra Lang looked at the resurrecting car and at the man rebuilding it and understood she'd been shown something she hadn't earned and had almost missed. Hour 23. 5 a.m. The next morning. The dawn push. The car whole again. The final work, the careful, unhurried final checks. Because the paddock book is fast, but it is never careless. A sunrise rebuild that isn't safe is just a slower kind of crash. And Judd had never in 15 years sent out a car he wouldn't put his own kid in. He went over it twice. Then, a third time. Because Tess was watching. And some standards you demonstrate. The eastern windows of the shop started to go gray, then pink. 5:52 a.m. Judd Calloway stepped back from a silver 911 GT3 that had, 24 hours ago, been a factory-condemned wreck under a cover in the corner of a garage and now sat gleaming, whole, true, alive, on his shop floor in the dawn light. 8 minutes to spare. "Okay," he said quietly. To the car, the old paddock benediction. "Let's hear you." He reached in and started it, and the flat six woke and settled into that hard, beautiful idle. And the sound filled the shop like a verdict, and Tess whooped, and Petra Lang put both hands over her mouth. 6 o'clock, ma'am, Judd said over the engine, checking the clock. "Told you. 24 hours. He walked over to her, and he did not hand her a repair invoice, and he did not hand her a bill of sale. He held out the key. "Now," he said. "You brought your gloves?" She had. That was the thing that undid her. Standing there in the dawn, she'd brought them. She hadn't understood why he'd asked, had told herself it was nonsense, and had put a pair of driving gloves in her coat pocket anyway. Because some part of Petra Lang, the part under the cover in the corner, had heard the invitation inside the instruction. "I don't understand the gloves," she lied, quietly. "Yeah, you do," Judd said. "You've understood since I said it." He pressed the key into her hand and closed her fingers around it. "This is the part that was never about the car, ma'am. I could hand you a rebuilt Porsche, and you'd have a nice Porsche, and nothing would change. You'd park it in the corner where the wreck used to be, and it'd become a new kind of monument, the car you're too careful to drive. That's not what tonight was for. He nodded at the open shop door, at the empty road beyond it going gold with sunrise. 2 years ago you reached for something and it ended in a wreck, and you decided that meant stop. The factory handed you a paper that said the reaching couldn't be undone. Well, he gestured at the idling car. There's the reaching. Undone, rebuilt, bones were true the whole time. The only thing left to find out is whether yours are. He stepped back. So go drive it. Not fast, not to prove anything. Just get in the car you crashed, and start it, and drive it out that door into the morning, and find out that reaching for something doesn't have to end in a wall. That's the rebuild, ma'am. The car was just the part I could do with my hands. Petra Lang stood there with the key in her fist and tears running down her face, and then she pulled on her driving gloves, and she got into the GT3, the car she'd crashed, the car she'd condemned, the car she'd kept as proof she should quit, and she started it, and she sat there shaking exactly the way she'd shaken 2 years ago, except this time she didn't get out. She drove it out the shop door into the sunrise. Slowly, carefully, alive. She came back 20 minutes later with a different face than she'd left with the face, Judd suspected, of the woman who'd walked into that dealership 2 years ago, the one who'd been under the cover in the corner, bones true the whole time. Now the money, because the story stays honest. Petra tried to pay him a fortune. Of course, it's the reflex. And Judd Calloway did the thing that made him who he was. He sold her back her own car. For $1 it was always yours. Ma'am, I just unburied it and attached exactly one condition. In writing. Because he was a paddock man, and paddock men believe in the sunrise clause, she had to drive it. Regularly. Really drive it. Not garage it. Not monument it. Put miles on it. A car like this dies in a corner under a cover, ma'am. So does the part of you that bought it. The price is $1 and you drive the thing. That's the whole bill. She paid the $1. She kept the condition the fleet garage staff would report over the following months that the boss's silver GT3 was almost never in its spot because the boss was out driving it, windows down, at dawn, before work, like a person who had decided to live a little, and this time meant it, and the deeper rebuild held, the way the car did. Because once Petra Lang understood what she'd been doing, collecting authoritative no's, hunting permission slips, welding other people's verdicts onto her own courage as an excuse to retreat, she couldn't unsee it. And she started, slowly, dismantling the museum. She began noticing the moment she reached for the expert who'd tell her a hard thing was impossible, and asking herself which book that expert was reading from, and whether the no was about the thing or just about their book. She got, her colleagues said, quietly bolder in the year that followed, took a swing at things the careful old Petra would have found a credentialed reason to avoid, not reckless, just no longer hiding behind other people's impossible. She kept the factory's write-off letter, she told Judd once, but she'd reframed it, literally, hung it in her office under a photo of the rebuilt car, as a reminder of the single most useful thing she'd ever learned, that it can't be done is almost always a sentence from somebody else's book. And you should always, always check whose book before you let it become the last word on your life. And Tess, the 11-year-old who'd only ever known shop dad, met paddock dad for one long night, and it rearranged her permanently in the best way. She'd spent the night watching a room full of somebody's assumptions about her father get demolished by the truth of what he could actually do. And she carried out of it a thing most kids don't learn until much too late, that quiet people are often quiet because they've got nothing to prove, and that the guy who came to laugh at your dad usually has no idea what your dad is. On the drive home, exhausted and glowing, she said, "Dad, can you teach me the fast guy stuff? The paddock stuff? Not to be a mechanic. Just I want to be the kind of person who can do the thing everybody says can't be done." And Judd Calloway had to keep his eyes very carefully on the road. The shop got a quiet new sideline after that word travels a small hand-lettered addition under the sign, rebuilds by appointment. Paddock rules. People bring him the cars other shops, and sometimes factories have written off. He checks the bones. When they're true, he tells them the same thing every time. The sentence that had become the whole philosophy of the place. It's not a write-off. It's just buried. Let's find out if the bones are true. There are two lies hiding inside every "it can't be done," and this story pulls them both into the light. The first lie is about time, and we could call it the miracle myth. When you watch someone do the seemingly impossible fast rebuild the wreck overnight, turn the company around in a quarter, master the thing in what looks like no time at all, your mind reaches for the word miracle, or genius, or luck, because the speed seems to come from nowhere. It never comes from nowhere. Judd Calloway didn't rebuild that car in 24 hours. He rebuilt it in 20 years, 15, in the paddock, drilling every sequence, plus the shop he'd spent years building into a pit box, plus 10,000 teardowns living in his hands, and then, one night, all of that stored preparation got spent in a single concentrated burn, and everybody watching called it a miracle. It wasn't. It was the 20 years finally showing. That's how every overnight thing that ever impressed you actually works. The night is short, because the readiness was long, which means the real question, the useful question, isn't how did they do that so fast, it's what am I preparing for right now, quietly, that will one day look like a miracle to someone who didn't watch me get ready. Speed is stored preparation. Go store some. And the second lie is about permission. And it's the deeper one. So take it with you. Petra Long built a whole careful life out of other people's verdicts, collecting authoritative no's and welding them onto her own fear so that quitting could feel like wisdom. And the thing that freed her was learning that every "it can't be done" she'd ever been handed was a sentence from somebody else's book, true within that book, and completely silent about hers. The factory wasn't wrong to write off her car. They were answering the economical question from the road car book, and by that book they were right. They just weren't answering the only question that turned out to matter, which came from a different book entirely. And here's the trap, the one you need to watch for in your own life. We take a no that's true within one narrow frame. This isn't economical. This isn't certifiable. This isn't how it's normally done. And we let it become the last word on what's possible. And worse, on who we are. We let the world grade our car, and then we decide it graded us. Don't. When someone hands you an impossible, check whose book it's written in before you let it close yours. The bones of the thing you gave up on, the business, the dream, the relationship, the version of yourself you wrote off after one bad wreck, the bones might be true the whole time, buried under wreckage that looks a lot worse than it is, waiting for someone who works from a different book and isn't scared of how bad it looks. It's not a write-off. It's just buried. Go check if the bones are true.